This morning. We are super thrilled to again have a guest speaker with us who is going to speak to a very, very, very important topic. There's this joke that says the work isn't complete until the paperwork is done. And indeed, the paperwork is where the proverbial tire hits the road. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Gideon to please talk to us. You have already met him. We've had him on a previous occasion. So we are going to jump right in and talk about reports, what they are and why they matter. Thank you, Gideon.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Bernadine. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys. I think what is important when we talk about reports, and I think you've touched upon it when we started out with the introduction, in the investigation environment, and this now includes the police environment, this includes the private, corporate, any type of semi-state environment, any kind of environment where you do an investigation. And again, any investigation for that matter. The results of that investigation has to be submitted to someone, whether it's the court, whether it's in the form of a case docket, whether it's in the form of a formal report of an inquiry. It doesn't matter. Whatever your efforts have been, it has to be submitted. And it is usually submitted in a written format, a format that someone else can access. It can be presented and someone can look at it and see what are the results of your efforts and what are the findings and what should we do about it. Now, I want to make a clear distinction, I think, about the police and the private environment, the non-police environment. In a police environment, you work on a case docket, and a case docket contains evidence, and that various types of evidence. For instance, or the majority of what it contains in terms of evidence have to be described or have to be wrapped up in statements. So that if you open a statement, you will start from A1 and you will work through a case docket, and each statement will represent some form of evidence. Where you, for instance, have obtained physical evidence, there will be a statement from a person to say that I found this evidence, it was handed in SAP 13, etc. So that case docket formulates your case. That is the management instrument. Outside of the police, our report is our management instrument, and also the vehicle that tells us what we have done. It could be criminal investigations, it could be civil investigations, it could be litigation, it could be about hearings, it could be about almost any kind of thing you can think of that has to be investigated. Not everything goes to court. Not everything ends up in a court of law. It might end up in a disciplinary hearing. It might end up in a lawyer's case. You're litigated. It might end up someone getting fired, or it might end up with recommendations in an institution how to get up their systems and procedures. All kinds of stuff. Now, let me then now go back to the report. Guys, and I want to concentrate on investigation reports where the focus will be either criminal, not criminal, but conducted in a forensic investigation environment outside the police. And I just want to check with you, Bernadine, is that correct where you want the focus to be? Hello, Bernadine? I don't know whether you can hear me, Bernadine.
Yes, sorry, I'm just struggling to unmute. No, you are spot on. Thank you so much.
Okay, so now, guys, I've presented report writing to over the years to various groups. You know what was interesting in my research? I found more than 20 to 30 examples of how reports are written, and how the body of it looks like, what it contains. what the format should look like, what are the headings, how you should number it. And I've worked for semi-state institutions where they would submit a report. The public protector will submit a report in a specific format. Ernst and Young will submit a specific format. So formats can differ. There's no set rule about it, but there are certain principles underlying it that has to be followed. With other words, doesn't matter who you write it for, or what the matter is, or what your organization or institution tells you what it should look like and what the format should be. It still has to have certain basic things. For an example, one of the examples I showed to people on course is that Coca-Cola, the big Coca-Cola, the multinational giant, when they conduct an investigation, it has to be only 2 pages, nothing more. Now, obviously, we can debate that. It is such a wide variety that's just unbelievable what the requirements of each organization might be. But let us go to the principles underlying a report. Why do we write a report? A report is basically a contract. A report is basically containing what you have done, instructed to do, what you have done, and what are the results. Before you can start writing a report, you have to negotiate what the person who gave you the authority or the mandate to conduct an investigation or to write a report. You were requested by someone to write a report, to conduct an investigation and write a report. Now, you have to sit down and understand, what do you want me to investigate? What will be the deliverables in my report? Do you want me to investigate this matter? Fine. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to register a criminal case? Do you want me to interview witnesses? Do you want me to collect physical evidence? What is the scope of this report? How do you want to engage me? Because, guys, if you want to engage me later on at the completion of my work, it has to be measured whether I've done the work that I set out to do. And it's not necessarily going to court in a criminal case. It is specifics. What were my objectives? If a first objective of a client, I'll take an example that I did last week, where a client, an attorney, firm of attorneys, there has been a break-in, and they required my services. The first thing I did was sit down with the owner and discuss with him, what do you want me as the private investigator or forensic investigator, what do you want me to do? And I'll give you, this is now a very practical way of explaining it. What he said to me is the following. Number one, I want to know what happened. We can all see there had been a break-in, but I want you to look at that break-in in detail. I want you to look at the scene of that incident and record it in detail so that we understand exactly, number one, what happened. So there is my first objective. Crime scene or incident scene, properly investigated and be able to tell the client. Right? I said to him, what else? Secondly, he wanted me to interview all the employees, the attorneys and employees that work there, to make sure that no employee was involved in the incident. Could I do that? Yes, I could. I could interview everybody and I could incorporate that into my report. So that became my objective number 2. Then thirdly, do you want me to help the police? No, he didn't want me to help the police. The police opened the case docket, he reported it. He's not interested in that, the fingerprints taken on the scene, if not. Thirdly, he wanted to know what was the motive for the break-in. Are his company under attack? Is someone trying to send him a message? Is there someone trying to intimidate? Or was it just a straightforward break-in? With other words, what was the motive and the reason behind the break-in? Number 4, if I can, and that's a very if I can, identify the perpetrators. Now, guys, there I stopped in terms of my objectives. And with the perpetrators, I'll say the following. The chances of identifying perpetrators are very slim. But that's why I did not add that as an objective. I said, if possible and if available, and if the evidence is available, we can identify the perpetrators. Then I've got my objectives. Now I had to say, what scope? How long do you want this investigation to? There was another one, and that is make recommendations how to prevent a future breaking. That is usually a part of what, and the private sector, they will tell you. Make a recommendation so that this incident does not occur again. So I've got my objectives, and partly I've got my scope. Now, what does the scope entail? The scope entails, what should I do in terms of my activities? Do I go to his premises? How long do I take? Do I write a report? Do I give it the results to him? How long does it take me? How many investigation hours? What will the cost per hour be, and the total cost? Once we've discussed that, I sent him an email. Usually it's a letter of engagement in that email, or it's just a mail that can act as a letter of engagement, or it will be a proposal that I send to him. In my proposal, I will set out the following. I will say to him, look, this is what happened, a quick background. These are the objectives we discussed. This is what you want me to do, the time frame, the cost, and that is part of the scope. And this will be the measurables at the end of the case, where you can measure whether I've done my work or not, and whether you will pay me. And if you agree on this, I want you to write on the bottom, yes, I want you to do this, continue to do it. That to me is my letter of engagement. Now you can draw up a letter of engagement. You can do it by mail. They can send you a mail. The format is not really important. What is important is that there is an engagement, a formal engagement, and it should be in writing. It doesn't help to get an engagement in orally. Why? In a private environment, in 3 months' time, because that's how long it takes to write a state, or to conduct an investigation, complete it, and write a report. A report writing is a very, very long process. Very long process. For every hour that you spend on a scene of incident scene, you will probably spend 5 hours writing the report and analyzing the evidence that you have available. For instance, when you interview people, you record them, and you have to go and listen to those recordings and make sure that you've got all the information and the facts. So your work in the office is usually 5 to 10 times more than your work on an incident scene. But okay, that you have to keep that in mind. So I sent out my engagement, or my letter of engagement, or my mandate, based on what we've discussed. The attorney sends me in his case, he sent me an email. He says, go ahead, conduct the investigation. Now, this is important. Why? Now I've got my engagement letter or engagement document in the form of an email, a letter, doesn't matter what. He can sign on the proposal, doesn't matter. I've got a document that serves as engagement. Plus, I've got a mandate. You need a mandate. What does a mandate mean? A mandate means I've got the locus standi. That's a Latin term. I've got the standing, the authority. I can go to the police. I can go to ADT. I can do things on behalf of the client. I have been authorized to do so. So if we go to court, if I have to do certain things, I can say to the court, I had an instruction, I had a letter of engagement, of I was engaged, and I had a mandate to do what I was requested or said I had to do. Very important stuff. Also, when I want to submit my bill, and the bill is quite extensive or large, and the person says he doesn't want to pay you, and you want to go to court, you send him a letter, attorney letter, you say, pay me this amount. and if you don't pay me this amount, I will go in civil litigation and demand it from court. If you don't have a letter of engagement or a mandate, you're not going to succeed because it will be a contentious issue. You don't have evidence to support your engagement or your objectives, your expectations. The person must have expectations, and you must be able to say, I could do this, but I could not do that. And it must all be reasonable. Okay, that is the background of how you start an investigation, and that will lead to your investigation report once you have completed the investigation. When do I usually start with my report? I start the day when I start the investigation. Why, guys? Investigations follow a line, a nexus. Let me try and explain this to you. It does include the police and include the private environment. Any kind of information that you have, any kind of engagement, correspondence, etc., becomes important. You start off in a criminal case, you've usually got a pocketbook. Pocketbook, you make notes. Do you take notes in a private environment? Yes, I take it in a notebook. That notebook, that pocketbook, whatever form, that recording must be reflected in statements or in a criminal case, sometimes in civil litigation as well, and it must be reflected in a report. Everything that your report contains must be similar to what the statement, must be similar to what your note-taking on the scene is. There might not be, you cannot allow discrepancies. If there are any discrepancies in that process, you can fail the total effort. Everything must be there. Okay, that is why I start as soon as possible when it's fresh in my memory, the same principles that you will write a statement on. Those same principles apply to report writing. You start as soon as possible because you're going to forget. Okay, introduction. Now I've conducted my investigation. Now I'm starting to write, or I'm busy writing my report. What would I suggest? Okay, your report. What are the principles the report should be written in? Guys, number one, it must be the truth. I think it's not in your book. It says accuracy. I want to say a little bit more than that. I want to say it must be the facts. It must be the truth. It must be absolutely correct. You cannot assume. You cannot put in something that someone else told you, or you cannot work on the word of something else or the evidence of someone else. If someone else saw something, you take a statement or you obtain a report from that person and you put it in your report. This is what person A saw, not what I saw. This is it's not directly what I experienced, saw, investigated, what someone else said. You have to be absolutely correct in what you say. If you have made factual mistakes, you can actually destroy the whole evidence there. So, and I see on in your books you say verifiable evidence. I want to go by facts and say the following: facts, 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 detail, 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 as much detail as possible. Yesterday I answered the question from an investigator who asked me, do I take photographs on a incident scene or a crime scene? I say yes. They ask me how many. I say to them hundreds, sometimes hundreds. Why? You know what? How many do I really use on my investigation report? 10, 20, 30 out of 100, out of 200? Why do I take many photographs? You can go to all the good investigators. They do exactly the same. Because you retain those photographs. You store it on your computer. You go through it and you see things on the photograph that you forgot, that you did not observe with your own eyes, or that you missed, or that you forgot you saw. The same with interviews. Why do I record my interviews? Guys, and ladies included, obviously, I'm an expert interviewer. And in my 40 years, I can tell you this. In almost all interviews, and I conduct thousands, you always miss important detail. Detail, detail, detail. And that leads you to things you can verify. If you see something, you observe something, you have to verify it. What is it that they see on it? So that goes back to accuracy, that goes back to truth, one of the principles. If you can go back one slide, please, Bernadine. We've got accuracy covered now. Objectivity, that is an important thing, objectivity. You cannot say what you feel or what you think. You can say what you think if you are an expert witness or you submit an expert report. But that should always be based on a number of observations on the facts. Very seldom are you required to make an opinionated or provide an opinion. And if so, the reasons for it, the backbone of it, the underlying facts must be there to be able to make an opinionated statement. For example, if I say a person has lied, there must be evidence to prove it. I cannot say that it is my gut feeling. You cannot say it. Even if it is your gut feeling, you cannot say it. Because a gut feeling cannot be proved. It can be proved if the person made a statement 1, statement 2, or a statement 3 with different versions. That is proof. You can put down the different statements, or in one interview, different things that has been said. That is objective, being objective towards it. Guys, you cannot be emotionally involved. It doesn't matter what you're investigating. You cannot make up your mind before you, for instance, interview someone that that person is lying or telling the truth. And often people who are lying are not guilty of something. They're lying because of various other reasons. So you have to be it must be clear that you're objective. Your work must show it. If you go to a court, for example, later on, and someone reads your statement or your report, it must be clear from the report. I think that is one of the requirements that I read somewhere, that the legal system, a judge made in a case law, a reported case, where a judge stated, you must be objective. You must provide facts, and you must be objective on it. You cannot be subjective. You cannot decide what is important or not important, what is relevant or not relevant. Yes, you do decide it, but you cannot throw out something. You have to retain it in your investigation. You can later on focus on point A, C, D, E, but all the points must be there. Okay, conflict of interest. Obviously, you cannot investigate your family. You cannot investigate something that you've got a vetted interest in. If something like that should happen, what I usually do, I give the investigation to someone else. It has happened to me in our environment, where I know the person who's supposed to be a suspect. Then I would say to the client, you know what, I do know that person. I think for reasons of being objective, I would rather let someone else conduct the investigation or do an interview. And sometimes they said, no, we believe you're objective enough. But what I do is that I make clear if there is an interest issue, that everybody understands it. And if I feel it will be a conflict of interest, I will, doesn't matter who says what, I will walk away from that specific interview or investigation. Okay, let's go back to the completeness. I think I've covered it in what I've already said. Guys, you cannot leave out something. You cannot. You have to, every single issue, every single fact, every single detail is important. And again, I go back to what I've told you. When I look at my photographs of crime scenes or incident scenes, and I listen to my recordings, it is human not to be able to remember everything. It is human not to be able to record everything on the scene. That's why I take photographs. That is why I make recordings. Later on, you discover stuff that you did not discover immediately. Okay, completeness, obviously, conciseness. Now, this is an interesting thing. Don't meander. Now, what does meander means? It means you go into rabbit holes not relevant to the issue at hand. Even if, with other words, I'm interviewing person. I give you an example. I'm interviewing Bernadine. She's now a witness to my case. And there is something strange about what Bernadine is doing at work, but it's not related to the investigation at hand. Now I spent an hour or two trying to figure out and interview her. What is this issue that she is dealing with? That has got nothing to do with what I'm investigating. It is something else that piques my interest, or it might be detrimental to the company. She's perhaps doing something else, moonlighting or something. Yes, note it and say it to your client if applicable. But don't spend your investigation effort going away from your objectives. Remember, how are you measured at the completion of your investigation and report? Whether you've achieved your investigation objectives. Okay, the next one. Let me see what comes up there, Bernadine.
Yeah, those were
What you
the four. Yeah, those were the four principles we spoke about, Gideon.
Yeah. Okay, what you say matters. What you do. I can say this. In an investigation, there's nothing off the record. Think about this. I often encounter the situation where someone says to me, I want to tell you something, but it's off the record. When you're interviewed, I've encountered where people say, I want to talk to you, but I want you to put off the tape recorder. Now, there in a civil litigation environment, you do get off the record issues. But in an investigation environment, there is almost nothing that is off the record. You cannot decide what is off the record or not. You as the investigator do not have that powers off the record. And then again, you're not objective. What you're now already done is taking sides or deciding what you're going to do or not to do. You can't. You have to record everything. There's nothing off the record. So everything that is being said to you, and remember this, another interesting thing, everything that is being said is a statement. Listen to what I've just now said. Everything that you write, everything that you say is actually a statement. You cannot undo it. The problem is it's very difficult to prove it if it is orally made. That is why we record it. But remember, what you say can be recorded and can be used as evidence. What you write in an SMS message, what you write on Facebook, we use it all the time. Those are statements. If you've done something, if you said you've done something and it is recorded and there is evidence to that effect, it becomes evidence. The same applies to you as the investigator. I have had instances where the investigator was recorded by the person, by the witness. I've actually investigated the case once, where insurance case, where the witness, the person who was the insured, made a claim of sexual harassment against the investigator. Investigations are a minefield because you're dealing with issues that will affect people's lives to a lesser or larger extent. The moment you are involved in that environment, you might be a big enemy to someone or not, but you always have to treat it that everything you do might be on the record. So be very careful. I hear the statement, I read it, but I like to say everything that you do, right, do, can become contentious. Okay, the next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Gideon. So what I also wanted to emphasize here is that it's easy to speak. It's easy to say things in an investigation, but
Yeah.
what you must walk the talk. You must
Yes.
honor what you never make promises. You only have your word, and your word is your honor. So do what you say.
I think where you come from is, and I see that with investigators all the time, is when you negotiate, and I see it on TV, guys. I see these TV detectives. I don't want to mention names, but investigators who conduct their investigations in the newspapers and the media. They arrive at scenes, they talk to clients, they make claims, and we can do this, we can do that. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. It doesn't work that way. There is nobody that can promise anything that is out of your own control. How can you say to a client, I promise you, I guarantee you that we will find the suspect and we will successfully prosecute? You cannot do that. Why? From a project principle, and a report writing is part of that principles, you have only authority and you have only got power to do things what you are allowed to do. The moment, for instance, a suspect has been identified and it becomes a police matter and the police arrest a person. I'm dealing with a case now. It's going on for 4 years. The private client, luckily I told him, sir, in these cases, I've seen cases taking 6 years from going to the police to end up in court if the docket doesn't get stolen 3 or 4 times. I do not have control over that process. I don't have control over the police process. I don't have control over the prosecution process, which the police do not have control over the prosecution process. Sometimes the prosecutor himself or herself doesn't have control over it. There's a magistrate. There are defense lawyers with all kinds of tactics. You can't determine the outcome. You can have a prima facie case and it can go to hell. And so you can never promise things. You can say, I can do this, this, and this. I can do my best. We can try this. We can do this. But I cannot tell you, or I can't promise you. The moment the person makes promises, I know that that's not a professional investigator. I say that from where I sit as a very experienced investigator. If someone tells me he can promise a result, if someone promises me that he can predict the outcome and promise the outcome, I know he or she is not telling the truth. And to me, that's not professionalism. They're lying. And I personally does not dislike it to the fullest degree when investigators conduct their investigations in the press. Because that is not the way to do it. That tells me that they're not really focusing on the issues, the facts. They're now focusing on it's actually money what they're usually focusing on, selling themselves, selling their products. Yes, it's like a second-hand car salesman. Focus on the reality of the issue, not the dreams. But okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, we have reached the end.
I just want to before it. Just a quick one, and I'll give you a very quick example of a generic report format.
Yes.
And in a generic report, investigation report, you probably have an introduction, a background. The introduction can contain the background, or you can just have a background, or you can have an introduction and a background. It's up to you to decide it. But you have to have something that puts the matter in context. That is usually a problem that you present, or you say, this is what happened, and this is what should be done. This is the problem that we are facing. Then you've got scope and objectives, or objectives and scope. You always have to have objectives. What are objectives? Objectives are measurable milestones, things you want to achieve. You have to visit a crime scene. You are going to do that. Those are things that the client can say, I've done it, you've done it, you've done it, you've done it. And if you've reached your objectives, you probably have reached your successful conclusion, whatever that might have been, your measurable successful conclusion. Your scope in a private environment is very important. Everything is, investigations are very expensive. It can go from 400 Rand an hour to 2,000-3,000 an hour. That's excluding the use of experts and specialists. An investigation can easily be anything from a few thousand Rand to hundreds of thousands of rands to millions of rands. So where do you cut it? Where do you stop? What do you include? How long should it take? How many people? What resources? You have to understand this before you start. It's not an open book. Nobody it really can't. An open book, it's an impossibility. So you have to have a scope and objectives, and that will include your objectives, your time frame, and your money, etc. You have to have, and sometimes we talk about limitations and restrictions. Guys, I don't want to say too much about that. It's not always applicable. But you know, in our modern environment, the environment in South Africa as we sit in today, you know that 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had power, limited electric power. What is the word in English?
Load shedding.
Load shedding for between 4 and 8 hours a day. Is that a limitation and a restriction upon you as investigator? Of course. You cannot get hold of people. Either they don't have power and cannot talk to you because the towers do not work anymore. Your communication goes down. You go to a scene of an incident scene and you don't have power, electric power, to be able to photograph and investigate it. Go to people that cannot access their computers. They cannot work. Does that have an effect on your work? Yes. Another example is where you're being told to investigate at a private company. And you say, okay, I want to interview let's say 10 employees. But 5 employees can never be getting hold of. That overseas, they just don't pitch up. Where do you sit? So I like always in my investigation proposals, or I like to put in availability of witnesses. They must ensure that the people are available. They must ensure that the relevant documents are made available. If I ask a company for their cell phone records, if it's applicable, example, and they don't give it to you, and it's material to the case, where do you sit? You can't proceed. Okay. Then usually what happens, then you conduct a heading will probably be investigation conducted. And under investigation conducted, you often have the following. Usually, not always, it depends on the type of investigation. People interviewed, photographs that you've taken, and you can have an additional photograph album, you can have additional documents attached to your report. But I will have interviews, I will have a photograph album, either in report or as attachment. I will have documents obtained, either inside or attached to the report. I will have physical evidence, or the incident scene of the incident scene. And then I will go on my facts and what I have. If I interviewed a person, I will have a synopsis of relevant factual issues that I address. And how many pages can that take? I don't know. Sometimes 20, sometimes 200-300. Then you will have your findings. And very important, you cannot have a finding if you don't address the issue under your investigation heading. From your findings, you can have a conclusion, and sometimes you might have a recommendation. It all depends on the specific report that you're doing. Now, this is very, very briefly, it's a very broad subject, a very intricate and difficult one, but this is the elementary issue of investigation reports. that we've spoken about. The key thing here, be honest, get your details, record everything, and negotiate beforehand what are your objectives, and you put everything in writing. You record everything correctly. Those are key issues. Anything else, Bernardine? A question, perhaps?
No, you see, I'm trying to type as you are talking because what you are giving is not in the slides, but it is so incredibly important. And I think you've touched on everything really that I think is fundamental. Gideon, just one thing I want you to clarify. When you, for example, go and do an interview, and you report on it, do you anchor that in terms of date, time, and place? And if so,
Yes.
is it important, and why is it important?
Yes, that is a very important. Bernardine, is actually, this is one of the, what I like to call in interviewing, we call it anchoring.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very important thing in all investigations, in all aspects of evidence, anchoring. The anchoring means place, date, time. Every single thing. If I pick up my phone or pick up a physical evidence, I must be able to say exactly where did I find it, what was the date I found it, what was the time. If I interview someone, place, date, time. Anything I do, if I obtain a document, place, date, time. Everything must be anchored. Everything must be anchored. You must be able to provide a timeline without any holes in it. And if you go to court, that is where these things become extremely important. And guys, that's why I like, for instance, you will never see me collect physical evidence that is not photographed. You will never see me collect documentary evidence that I collect that is not photographed. Never. And my photographs always got a date stamp and a time stamp on it. Every photo's got a date and a time on it. And I've got a camera where I activate the geo-location of it. With other words, it will give you the lats and the longs, the GPS location of a photograph with the date and the time. And you ask me why. I'll tell you why. You go to court. And I can give you a real life example of serious cases. They say to you, this is a story our client will say he wasn't there. Here you are. How do they attack you? If you can show them that and the court can see it, they're cooked. Their goose is cooked. I can tell you this. We've had cases, big cases, where there's a photograph with a date stamp on it. The person, the accused, says he wasn't there. There is the accused on the photograph, date, place, time. And of course, they argue it always. And they ask you, you say to them, you're the witness. Your Honor, or this is the photograph I took on that date, that time. Just make sure it's correct. I've seen where it is incorrect. For example, give you an interesting example, Namibia's timeline, they're 1 hour, I think, after us. It differs, 1 hour. One investigator went there to conduct investigation, and he did not adjust his camera settings. Interesting, huh? Because you can automatically adjust, or you can do it manually.
Yeah.
So all these things are important to consider, and then you have to explain to a court, why does your camera say it's Wednesday the 12th? You know, when it was actually Thursday the 13th or something like that. Then you're just more difficult. Okay, yeah. Yes.
Sorry, I just want to clarify one issue. So you take the photos now. Have you been attacked, in inverted commas, in court about the chain of custody, whether you manipulated the date or the images?
Very seldom. Very seldom.
Very seldom.
One of those fellas. Yes. I've had one case, let me rather say, it was my case, but my colleague testified in a surveillance. And
Yeah.
in a cash and transit gang, they all got 100 years plus, where they did surveillance on 6 people. He took, I think, 300 photographs. In the photograph album presented to court, I think there was 22 photographs of between 20 and 30. The first thing that the defense counsel, they attack the process, they attack everything they can attack because they know they're guilty. What he did and what we all do, we put it in a folder on your computer and you store it. If you have to write a report or a statement, you take those photos, you copy photographs from it, but you leave the original in the folder.
Yes.
So what my colleague did, when they attacked him in court, he took out a memory stick. He says, yes, almost 300 photographs. You're welcome to go through it. Yeah. Here are the recordings. You're welcome to go through it. I can tell you, if you do the work like this, you are not attacked, because they know if they attack this line of evidence, they're going to come second best. They are scared to attack you if they, when they attack you when they see there's an opportunity to score a point.
Yeah.
But they can attack it. But you are the witness. Remember a photograph when you hand it in.
Yeah.
It's like a video. There must always be a witness. It's documentary evidence. The witness will say, and that is now me, this is what I took the photograph. I actually verbatim once in court testified. They asked me, what did I see? I say, Your Honor, what you saw on the photograph, I was looking through the camera lens. So what is in this photograph is exactly what I saw.
Yeah.
And
sure.
What argument can you bring in against it?
Nothing.
This is exactly what I saw, because I was looking through the lens and clicking the button.
Yeah.
The defense attorney got very angry at that point, but we immediately walked off the point, because he can say that's not the case, and then the witness says, this is what I saw. Your Honor, here is the photograph. How do they attack it? If you're lying and there's some other issues there, I'm not talking about that. If there's reason for them to attack it because you've manipulated something, or you're busy trying to do some shenanigans that should not be there. But I'm talking about where a witness provides direct, believable, factual evidence. How do you attack it?
Yeah.
It is very difficult to attack it.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes, Gideon, I don't see any questions in the chat. I'm going to unmute the mics of all our participants.
Sorry, just another thing. You know that anything you write, anything that you compile, any report that you write, any note can be subpoenaed. Listen very carefully.
What does that mean in practical terms?
Whatever you do, the other party or the defense or the party that you litigate can ask for a subpoena to obtain all those records. And once you've written down something in a statement, a note, or a report, you cannot alter it. You have to bring out an additional report.
Yeah.
Saying that is incorrect, or an addendum to that report. You can't just take it out of a report and change it. Very important. Just remember that.
Okay, everybody, question time. If you want to pose a question to Gideon, please raise your hand and then I will acknowledge you, and then you can ask, or you can pop your question into the chat box. I see our students are quiet, which tells me, I think, that you have addressed the most pertinent things. And I know I've once again learned so much about report writing and the importance of initial note taking from the start of your investigation. I mean, we all have shopping lists on our fridges. It's simply because we cannot remember everything. No person is a supercomputer.
I can tell you sorry, I don't want to elaborate this. I've once been a witness where the
Mm-hmm.
person testified that he could remember everything. But you know what the defense counsel did in court?
Mm-hmm.
They brought in an expert to test that person's memory. They
Oh,
submitted the witness to a memory test in court,
ah,
which he failed.
yeah, obviously, yeah. Sure.
Very
Interesting.
careful.
Mm,
Very careful.
yeah. Okay, I don't see any questions. I don't see any hands. So I'm not going to belabor the point. Gideon, thank you very much for joining us. To the students on the platform, I hope that you found it valuable and insightful. And then we will be posting the link on the module site. Thank you so much, everybody, and have an awesome day.